Hello, hello, and welcome to your live bonus Thrive Through Turbulent Times Masterclass. I'm so thrilled that you're here and joining us today and that you've been on this journey. Maybe you've seen one or two videos. Maybe this is your first one. Wherever you are, we're thrilled to be on it with you. And today it's very special because we are live, which is a wonderful opportunity to get some questions and have some interactions. And I am so thrilled to be able to introduce today's Thriver. For those of you that have watched some of the previous masterclasses, this is going to tie in really nicely. And for those of you, it might be new material, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited she agreed to come on, because I think that what we're going to be talking about today is so foundational. And it's something I wish I had during my accident and my recovery, because it took me so long. There were so many other things going on, and I saw specialist after specialist in tens of thousands of dollars, which is why I ended up $92,000 in debt. I was just trying to find the answer. And if I had known this woman back then, I think that things would have been very different. And it's one of the reasons why I'm doing this is to hopefully spare some of you some time and speed up your process in no matter where you are, whether you are recovering from a setback or from a challenge or health, or you're looking to where you've been and you want to just take it to the next level, and maybe you're ready to up level. So no matter where you are, I want to take us from this point today to catapulting us to the next level and to thrive. So today's wonderful, fantastic thriver is a woman, Melanie Weller. She is a medical visionary, and she comes at what we're going to be talking about, the relationship with yourself and your business, your work, from such a unique perspective. And if you haven't heard of the vagus nerve, or you don't know a whole lot about it, you're going to get some great new insight today that's, I think, going to shift the way you think on a lot of levels. It's so, as I said, foundational. And we're going to have some fun where there's going to be the opportunity for some Q&A, but please welcome, we will do a silent round of applause for Melanie Weller.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness. So happy to have you. And I know some of the people that are here today, they are familiar with your work, and we're thrilled that you're here, and many aren't. So we'd love to get a sense of, how do you come to your work and this topic of Thrive? Give us a little bit of background, if you will.
Sure. So I'm a physical therapist in conventional terms, and I've been a PT for about 25, going on this year will be 25 years for me. And I was an athletic trainer before I went to physical therapy school. So I've been working with people's bodies for the better part of 30 years. And very early in my physical therapy career, I ended up working with people that had not found success in other places, not in the conventional medical system, not in the alternative medical system. They were just really struggling. And the clinic where I was I had an amazing mentor who kind of looped me into or got me introduced to a lot of these really wonderful secrets. But I saw people that had just failed every intervention, or really been failed by the medical system, and they were not heard, they were not seen. And our medical system, for all of the amazing things that it does, is not very good at looking at people head to toe, and certainly not as a mechanical being. We know more about our cars than we do about our bodies in a mechanical sense. And by the time somebody comes to me, for example, with back pain, they are mechanically not working right at their big toe, at their ankle, at their knee, at their hip, at their rib cage, at their neck, and even into their cranial mechanics. And so they have no shock absorption above or below the site where they're having pain. And the place where they're having pain is the part that's taking a beating because there's no shock absorption. And in working with these people over and over, because you get to know them really well, you spend a lot of time with, PTs spend more time with patients than a lot of other practitioners do. And especially if you're in a good clinic, and I'm old enough to have been around when insurance let us spend more time with people than they sometimes do now. And what I heard over and over was that what was happening in their body was metaphorically playing out in their personal lives, in their businesses, and that they were really just living this rule of as above, so below. And what I noticed over time is that there were very specific stress manifests in the body in very specific ways. And so I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to introduce you guys to the vagus nerve. But the things that make the vagus nerve compressed are very prescriptive. It's very predictable how we hold stress in the body. And so I'm going to give you guys an introduction to that. And so I help people not only create more flow within their body with different situations, but also take that into creating more flow in their business and more flow in their personal lives, and really mapping their businesses out as a body and looking at where the compression points are within that and how that matches to your physical body. And then we open up the floodgates in the best possible way so that you get all the flow and really are able to accomplish your goals and be and at the end of the day, what I really love to do is help people tap into their genius. And that's also what this really opens up for people. But we're going to start at the vagus nerve. And I was introduced to the vagus nerve and the possibility of it being a pinched nerve well over 20 years ago. And your vagus nerve is your 10th cranial nerve. We have 12 of them. And that just cranial nerve means it comes out of your brainstem. So your vagus nerve goes all the way from your brainstem down to the pelvis. So it's big. It's outside of the spinal cord. I'm going to give you I'm going to skim all the things that it innervates, because it innervates a lot of things. But as it comes out of your brainstem, it goes down to your heart, and then it loops back up to innervate your vocal cords. So I like to think of it as the nerve that allows us to speak our hearts. So we have it innervating our voices. It innervates our hearts. It innervates our digestive systems. It's the nerve that helps the muscles, or that allows the muscles of the digestive system to move food through. We cannot absorb vitamin B12 without our vagus nerves. It is involved in digestive enzyme secretion and bile secretion. And so, and that's a lot of the motor end of it. Your vagus nerve does a lot of sensory information. It provides information from most of your organs up to your brain. It innervates the skin of your ear canal. So you hear, sound comes into your body through your vagus nerve. It innervates some of your taste buds and your tongue. It's involved in smell too, though the mechanism of that they're not entirely clear about. They know there's an association. And in the research, well, I'll say a couple of things before I get into one set of the research. So the research shows that how well your vagus nerve functions has predictive value for how long people with pancreatic cancer will live. So we know it's very integral to our immune function, that when you have people with pancreatic cancer that have a higher functioning vagus nerve live longer. So
it sounds like too that, right, because of the immune function, right, which of course,
so 70%. Yes, it is crucial right now in the midst of this pandemic to have a healthy vagus nerve, because 70% of our immune systems are in our gut, and your vagus nerve is the wiring. It's the electrical system for your gut. So if you have a healthy vagus nerve, you are going to have a healthier immune system.
Absolutely. Oh, and there were a couple things that you said earlier too that I want to touch on and reinforce for people, especially you've seen hundreds and thousands of patients, and you've seen some of these patterns that of people not healing, and kind of, as you said, as above, so below, where our body is playing out things that are also happening and showing up in other aspects of our lives. And I experienced this with my accident, and it's was so much that was going on that was not just physical. And as you say, our medical system misses a lot. And so being able to look at your approach and get this education around the vagus nerve and all that it affects and how it affects the quality of our life, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and then how all those things affect all the other aspects of our lives. So powerful. So please continue.
Thank you. Yeah. So medically, we know that stress is 75 to 90% of all disease and dysfunction, but we don't talk really very specifically about what stress is or what the roots of it are. Like we know that we need to meditate, or we know that we need to exercise, and there are things that are that are really helpful and that give measurable benefit. Meditation's great for your vagus nerve. Exercise is great for your vagus nerve. Singing is great for your vagus nerve.
How about dancing?
Absolutely. I think movement in general. Yes, movement is incredible medicine. The benefits of movement, if you could put movement into a pill, nobody would need anything else. Like, movement is incredible medicine. What I see a lot in my practice, the question that I ask people a lot is filling your cup draining you? Because they've got a laundry list of things that they could do, or that they do, or that, and that they put all of this effort into all of the doing. But we are really made in thought, word, and deed. And that there's, if I was going to couch it, that the doing is important, but it's also your mindset, like how you're thinking about yourself, and not just thinking about yourself with your mind, because your mind is your mind can be a liar. And I will say it very often is that your body will tell you the truth. Like, really, that your mind and your body are the same thing. That your reliable mind, like that mind, that voice out here that's tripping all the, you're not good enough, and I don't know if you can do this, and is this safe kind of stuff, is not the one to trust. And the vagus nerve, as it innervates your heart, one of the hormones that's really involved in trust is oxytocin. And our hearts are endocrine glands, and they make oxytocin. And there's all sorts of research about how we trust others, and that trust, as you build trust in businesses are more successful when you build a culture of trust. There's not as much effort, as much research around how we trust ourselves.
Ooh, yes.
And so I really work with kind of helping people tap into their bodies in a way that helps them develop a relationship with their body that they can grow to trust. And it's like any relationship, you have to build it, but we are all really in the hamster wheels in our heads and not in our bodies.
Yeah, it's such a great image. It's spinning and spinning and spinning, and and we wonder why we're not getting any traction.
Exactly. Right. Like, we're literally not in our feet. Like, the amount of time I spend getting people all the way down to their feet energetically is a lot. Like, I do, like, or that's something. And I'm going to give you guys a really, one of my favorite quick tricks and to do that for yourself today. And I'll just loop back to the research one more time. Your vagus nerve, it mediates inflammation, it mediates sweating, and it mediates pleasure as well. So, like, women with complete spinal cord injuries can achieve orgasm with vagus nerve stimulation. And as a PT, mediating inflammation was one of the really attractive points of it. The other one for me was that it uses the same neurotransmitter that your muscles do. So you get these beautiful musculoskeletal shifts. I can decompress somebody's vagus nerve at the base of their skull, and it changes their knee biomechanics and their foot biomechanics. And, and they look at me like, what kind of sorcery is this? And it's so much fun. Like, I love that. And I work with people online too. So I get to make these changes in all sorts of different formats with people. So it's, I love that far reaching effect, and that it's really treating the system and it's treating the whole. And in the research, they'll often put electrical stimulation on the vagus nerve, and that does all sorts of other amazing things, including it reverses the mitochondrial defects deep in the cells that go with heart disease. And so at the cellular level, your vagus nerve is not in your mitochondria directly, but it creates a cascade of events that heal your mitochondria so that your heart disease is healed. And it also remaps your brain at the highest levels. So you get literal changes in the real estate in your brain. And with pain patients, this is really important. And I would say this doesn't only go with chronic pain, but I would say any chronic limiting belief, chronic habit, chronic pattern that we embody, because one, we're wired for what's familiar, not what's right for us.
That's so good. Say that again, please. That's so good.
We are wired for what's familiar, not what's right. This is why abused women go back to their abusers, for example, because it's familiar. They know it's not right, but we are wired for what's familiar. We are not wired for what's right for us. It takes effort and work to step into what's right for us.
Yeah, because it can be uncomfortable. Because it's
incredibly uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. It feels unsafe. Yes. It's going to light up our fight and flight system, our threat management system. And your vagus nerve is the opposite of that. It's your grace under pressure, your rest and digest, and all things that feel good. You guys are all familiar with when your vagus nerve isn't working well, when you go to do public speaking or something similar like that, and you get a lump in your throat and your palms sweat and your heart races and your stomach feels awful because your vagus nerve has been dialed down because it innervates all of those things. And your fight and flight system has been spooled up.
Yeah, I think whether it's public speaking or even if it's just getting up to speak in front of a couple of people, like we think of public speaking of like you're standing in front of a stage of hundreds and it's like, this is public speaking. And
absolutely.
We don't even want to get off of our video. We want to be, kind of behind the Zoom lens, even because it can create some anxiety.
Yeah. And you can really train your vagus nerve. Like I work with speakers and performers sometimes, and we work with that to you can actually, there's research that shows you can train your vagus nerve function so that you are essentially in a meditative state, whether you're sitting still and meditating or off performing an Olympic event or on a stage in front of 10,000 people, that you can train yourself to be in a state of, they call it coherence, heart-brain coherence, in no matter what your activity level is. So this is the great thing. Our brains are, plastic is the scientific term for it, but they're changeable. And even into our elderly years, there's no limitation as to, our brains never stop adapting. So you can change that real estate. If you have a bad pattern taking up a lot of real estate in your brain, it is highly possible to repattern that.
It's such good news. It's not permanent. I think for a lot of us, we feel like we get stuck and that stuck feels so permanent and that then increases the anxiety. So this is great news that there is conditioning that we can do. We're not hardwired and therefore that's just the way it is. Oh, this happened to me and that's just the way it is. This is what happened to me as a kid or as a young adult, whatever. And we feel like that's just going to constantly play over and over again. So I think this is really hopeful information, is that
I think it is. And we embody stress horizontally in our body on our, what's called the transverse plane. So we know through the research that stress and trauma always affect the voice and the breath. And your vocal cords and your diaphragm, which is the muscle we all breathe with, are horizontally oriented in our bodies. So, for example, nobody gets stressed or traumatized and has a really great arm swing when they walk. Everybody locks up. Rotation is the first thing that we give up, and it tends to be the last thing that we recover. And when we have stress and anxiety and trauma living in our bodies, and it's always living in our bodies, it's not, that's really how the research overwhelmingly shows that you can't talk yourself out of it, that you have to, without having also a body-based intervention that goes with it. But you cannot always meditate or mindset or therapy yourself out of a pinched vagus nerve.
Can't think your way out of this one.
You're not going to be able to think your way out of it. And so the difference between acute, subacute pain and chronic pain is that chronic pain gets locked into your limbic system. And that's where your emotions are. And that's why it's so important to talk about the emotional underpinnings of these things, because you will not logic yourself out of your limbic system. You need an emotional reaction, a story to get out of that. All of the leading pain science experts will say they get really excited when somebody cries or gets angry when they describe pain to them, because they know they're going to get better. It's the people with a flat affect that they worry about. And I am really good at making people cry. And sometimes they get angry too. but
like you say, it's a good sign.
It's a great sign. I get really excited. I'm like, no, like, you've got to move this. And the anger is actually, I will say is actually kind of one of my favorite reactions, because they'll start moving after I've worked with them, and they'll be confused about where their pain went. And then they're angry because they don't think it should have been that easy to get better. Because I see people that have been around the block multiple times. So I'm not their first, unless they already know me and have a relationship with me for something else they've seen me for. Like, I am not most people's first line of defense, when something happens. So I've seen so many of the people that have just been struggling and circling the block without getting any answers. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of assessment in your body and talk about the underpinnings of what that is. And then I'll take you through at least one or two exercises to try and transform them. And then we'll do questions. Does that sound good, Brenda?
Fantastic. Yes.
Okay. All right. So what I'd like you to do first is just check your neck range of motion. Turn right and turn left. And I'm a little bit limited to the left today. I don't know. I played tennis. I was fine this morning. I played tennis. I treated a client. Now I'm doing this. And I was like, I'm going to be a good example this morning. So I already treated myself a little bit. So, and the other thing that you can do is to turn your head to one side, as long as it's comfortable. None of this should hurt. And to take your ear that's in front and bring it down towards your chest. Okay. And if you hit a brick wall up here, or if you can't go at least like 75, 80 degrees, if 90 degrees was fully looking to one side, normal range of motion is about 80 degrees to the side. And when you're bringing your ear towards your chest, like, that's about normal. Like, you shouldn't be hitting a brick wall up here.
I like that.
But that's really common. People do that. And so that is part of what tells me that the vagus nerve is compressed at the base of the skull. And the roots of that are often when our heroics and our desires are at odds with each other. When we're being the hero in someone else's story at the expense of our own, or we're satisfying everybody else's desires at the expense of our own.
Who can relate to that? A show of hands. How many of you, either currently or in the past, you've been the person you've been the hero for someone else and you forgot to be the hero here, right? So I think we can all relate to, it's easier to take care of someone else first. So this is great. It's so important.
Absolutely. Yes. And the second one I want you to do is put a hand over your heart. And if you have the ability, I'd like you to put a hand on the backside of your rib cage. If you can get it up to the backside of your heart, great. If not, just get as close as you can there. And I want you to take a couple deep breaths. And just feel the rib movement under your hands. So I can guarantee you your front hand is going to move. You're going to feel your ribs expand there. My question is, what's happening to the hand in back? Is it staying flat where all the movement, the expansion is happening on the front side of your chest? Or maybe your hand on the back is sliding up and down, or is it expanding backwards? I will tell you, it's very unusual for me to see somebody that can breathe into the backside of their rib cage that can expand backwards when I first meet them. It's much more common to have your hand be completely still or to maybe have a little bit of vertical movement there. And so your vagus nerve can get compressed on the backside of your heart. And the backside of our heart store inflammation. There's it's a big, the backside of the heart's a big deal. And getting more motion there can be transformative for a wide variety of conditions. And when we're limited there, it's when our operating system and our practices are at odds with each other. So this kind of goes back to being too much in our heads and not in our hearts, like having, not being heart-centered at some level. And when our practices are all about avoiding being in our bodies, which is a super common thing, we're all like, it's uncomfortable to start, and it's and it's weird because we're culturally not conditioned for that at all, to have this language with our bodies, to have this relationship with our bodies. We give all of that control to our medical providers. When something hurts, we think, oh, that's nothing. That's not, and the stories I hear over and over is, oh, well, I felt something in my back, and then it went away. And then I got another little twinge this other time. And then, I felt something a few months later, and then it all snapped, and then they had an acute episode. But there were little clues along the way that were just not attended to because we frankly don't have a language to know how to deal with that.
And the practice, we
have no idea
from here up.
Yes. And so anyway, so when our operating point and our practices are at odds with each other, it impairs our nourishment, and like we can't feed ourselves, and your spiritual food, your energetic food is as important as your physical food. Like if your work nourishes you, great. If your like creativity and self-expression nourish you, great. But if you're not like my husband's like this, he has to have some kind of, he doesn't have a house project to work on to exercise his creativity because he's a repressed artist. So he doesn't do art. But if he doesn't have like a household thing to tinker with, he is miserable to deal with. Like that, he really needs that spiritual food to be level across all areas of his life.
And so say it again, this is where our operating system
or like our operating point, that you're like your operating point and your practices are at odds with each other. So people can be too much in their heads. I mean, I will say that the other operating point sometimes is that people are too much in their maybe too much in their pelvises. Like, that might be like and I don't want to say like sometimes that might show up as like a really high sex drive, but I don't want that to necessarily be a negative thing. But it's like when everything is like, we live in this we hypersexualize a lot of things, so like sometimes, but it could be like the operating point, like it's not just being in your head, but that's probably the most common and easy to relate to one. I know the being like the sexual one is a little tricky. That's a much longer discussion that we don't have time for here. That has lots of nuances to it. But we all know, like, but like we all know that leader and that person that operates more from that point in their body than others. And the third one is where your transformation and your rootedness become at odds with each other. And this is where we're kind of like puppies that don't want to go for a walk. We don't want to change because we're wired for what's familiar. And it's really scary to show up differently. Everybody, you won't know who you are. No one else will know who you are. You'll lose your friends. the way everybody interacts with you might change, and all of those stories in our heads start to spin around when we look at change. And one of the most fun ways to assess where you are with this is to move. I'm going to show you how to move your toes, or give you a little toe test. And so I'm just going to model with my fingers here. But what I want you to do is just lift, and you can do this this together with each foot, or you can do them one at a time. But I want you to just lift your big toe and leave the other 4 toes down. And it's definitely easier if you don't have shoes on. Okay. And then the next step is to move your big toe and second toe and leave the other 3 down. And so this really is a test this tells me how well your pelvic floor is functioning.
Isn't that fantastic?
So if you're, and so this is kind of this is about our rootedness. Like, even if you are familiar with chakras, this goes with your root chakra as well. And but then you can do the first 3 toes, 4 toes. You can kind of play with this and see how dexterous you are with the toes. And I'm going to take you through a couple exercises, just really easy breathing exercises. None of this should hurt. And then we'll have you reassess and just see if that's any different. I will tell you that I have been revamping a lot of things in my business in the last couple of months. And as I've been doing that, my toes, I became not as good at the toe thing, because I was digging my feet in, resisting this change. It's a big change. And so, when I finally connected that, I was like, oh, I'm going to just do this to kind of energetically open up some space for myself. And it's worked. It's been a good exercise to help me move forward into a realm that I didn't really ever think I would go into on a professional level. So it's been exciting. All right. So then to change this, what I want you to do for all the exercises, I'm going to have you cross your ankles so your left one is in front of your right.
Let's all do this together. Our left is in front of
our right. We can all do it together. And then I want you to take your right hand and put it on the outside of your left thigh, or across your body as close as you can get to that side. And then take your left hand and put it behind your head, as long as it's comfortable. None of this should be painful or anything. And now I want you to inhale into the backside of your heart. So I want you to breathe into the backside of your heart for a count of 5. Hold it for a count of 8. And then you can count fast if you can't count it. Hold it that long. And then exhale like you're blowing through a straw or blowing out a candle for a count of 13, or as long as you can. Okay. And so do 2 more breaths in this position. And this exercise does a couple of things, but on the most fundamental level, when our diaphragms, the muscle that we breathe with, gets dysfunctional, your diaphragm is supposed to be a dome. And when it gets dysfunctional, it goes from a dome to being flattened. And so this brings the dome back up to your diaphragm. And this is great for people. This is wonderful for back pain. This is wonderful for even neck pain, anytime you zig when you should have zagged. And this is really nice for opening up the operating point and practices limitation so that you get some better nourishment. Okay. And then you're going to keep your ankles crossed, and I'm going to take my headphones off to show you this next one. I want you to grab on to these little tabs at the front of your ears, like the ones that if you didn't want to hear me, you'd push over your ears and go la 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 la. But you want to grab those between your thumb and forefinger, okay? And so you're going to pull the right one gently to the right and the left one gently to the left. Okay, and your same breath pattern. You're going to inhale into the backside of your heart and hold and exhale. And if you want to amplify it up a little bit, you can bend your wrists kind of towards your thumb side. So I'm doing like that. but it's all super gentle. You're not generating a ton of force. Your vagus nerve comes out between your temporal bone, which is under your ears, and your occipital bone, which is the back of your head. So the easiest way to create a little more, this is grabbing onto your ears like this is one of the easiest ways to grab onto your temporal bone. All right, and then the last
Can we do the same count on that? 5, 8, 13?
5, 8, 13. Yep, all the same. And then the last one is to put a hand on your low belly, and your other hand just in the small of your back, like, or on your sacrum. Okay, so you're just sandwiching your body like this. And if you can, do a little ratchet like this to go towards your thumbs. Okay, and then same breath pattern. Inhale into the backside of your heart for 5, hold for 8, and exhale for 13. And if this is uncomfortable on your hands, you can either be way more gentle. All of my techniques that I was trained in initially by my mentors involved about 5 grams of force, which is the weight of a nickel. So this is not about pushing hard. This is really just about getting some deeper energetic engagement, and just really, you can imagine even that you have like a flashlight beam or laser beam between your hands, so to help them connect, but you don't have to push hard to get deep releases.
Thank you. That's so important, because I think we can get so gung-ho and eager, and we don't have to put in so much effort. We can dial it back and find that there's so much in the subtle.
There's so much in the subtle, and we make healing so hard. Like, we really do. It does not have to be this hard. And that's one of my big missions, is to really just like, let's play with how easy this can be. What I've spent years doing, the game I always played with myself, and I just never, you know, I don't know why I always did it. It was just what I did. But when we work with complicated chronic pain patients, they are, and I say this in the most loving way, biomechanical train wrecks. Like, I could treat every joint in their body all day long. You know, there's a lot going on. And so the game I played with myself was, what 1, 2, or 3 things can I do to change 10, 20, or 30 things going on with them? And so this is really the culmination of all of that experience. That this is really getting to the root of stuff, so that you don't have to go chasing your pain and chasing your tail, trying to get what you want out of your life.
Thank goodness.
It's exhausting. I've been there too. My own trauma is very much about lost voice and not being able to speak, and not being allowed to speak, not being allowed to sing, and not being allowed to, just in general, to express what was important to me. And I was the master of suppressing emotions from my childhood experiences. And then I was a Navy wife for 20 years. I was an awesome Navy wife, because I could keep the lid on all my emotions. You know, my husband's gone for 6 months, September 11th, no problem. I was really good at being level through all of that. And then once he retired, like, there was nothing, like, the lid came off of my container, and it was really hard, and my body fell apart. My marriage was struggling, and I had a professional lawsuit against me. So a lot of this was real, like, the stress management expert was coming unglued at all levels. And so, you know, and this, the system was really born, like, out of that experience, and really figuring out myself, you know, taking a dose of my own medicine for one, and two, you know, really thinking, like, how can I make this better? And how can I use, you know, what I'm learning on myself, and learning, I took a step back from my practice for a while to sort of just reimagine what it could look like, because at the end of the day, I will tell you that all of this happened because I was not showing up authentically in myself. I have a lot of credentials a lot of letters after my name, and I was really hiding behind all of that. And they were at some level were validation mechanisms for myself, like I wasn't enough without them.
Mm.
And the magic really happens. And this, so I work with a lot of medical practitioners, and I teach residents, and I teach, continuing education courses. The magic really happens when you show up fully and completely as yourself.
And you're such a beautiful example of this, Melanie. And it's amazing how with all your work and all of your study and all of that you then still provided this opportunity to go to a deeper level, and from that the next level of your work is born, and all of the tools that you have to offer. And I also I want to thank you for the vulnerability in sharing, because it's such a beautiful example, and it gives everybody else even just a little bit more permission to be real and to be vulnerable, and to know that there, as uncomfortable as that may be, that there's something on the other side, and that's kind of our path through.
Trauma above all, and I don't want to minimize, like, I get it. It's hard. Like we all have it at some level, and, but trauma is really an invitation and an initiation into a new way of being, because you can't be your old self
So beautifully said.
afterwards.
Yeah.
But you can have something amazing.
It can be better,
And it
right?
can be better. It can be beyond your wildest dreams. And that doesn't mean that there's not still some amount of pain and grief, and that there's all those things that we can do with. I contextualize a lot of this through the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris. And I'll give you the super short recap, but Osiris's brother killed him twice. His wife, Osiris's wife, Isis brought him back to life once. Then Osiris found out about that. He found Osiris and chopped his body into pieces and scattered the pieces. Isis put him back together and brought him back to life long enough to conceive their divine child, Horus. And then Osiris went on to be king of the underworld, which for the Egyptians was where all life came from and all treasures were found. And we use dismemberment metaphors in our language all the time. We say we're falling apart, we can't get it together, our hearts are broken, our lives are shattered. And everybody in that story, obviously except for his brother, and his soldiers, probably thought that Osiris's destiny was to be the king of Egypt, and his true destiny was to be the king of the underworld. And he literally had to come apart to come back together in a new way. And that's a very universal story that we can all relate to.
Absolutely. And what you're providing is an opportunity and a different tool and access for us to start to put ourselves back together again.
I am all about the superhighway.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Like, here's one thing, the key that, all your study, you're like, I'm going to do this one thing that helps affect 10 of these other things, like it chunks it all together. Yeah, it's so powerful. And I do think many of you that are joining us and that are watching, you think you can relate to that, to feeling like we're coming apart, to feel like we're losing it. And so the dismemberment pieces are something that we can all relate to. Even I refer to my story, for those of you that have heard it, right? I refer to, after my accidents, like, I had a Humpty Dumpty team. It was like to put all of the pieces back together again. And there's still pieces, there's still growth, there's still things that I'm learning, and still things to heal, and next levels and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's like, how can we start to pull in more of ourselves and connect the pieces that are disconnected in our body, and how that then shows up in our world, in our relationships, in our business, in our work, and do the internal work, so that then what ripples out shows up also in those other aspects of our lives.
Well, and I love what I like, and this is what I'm writing my book right now, and my working title for it is Remembering, because we're bringing those pieces back together. We're remembering ourselves.
Oh, that's great. Yes, so good. Well, is this a good time for us to switch into Q&A, Melanie, or was there anything else
Absolutely.
you
No, no,
wanted to
no.
say
That's good.
before that?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, great.
Perfect.
So we have the wonderful and talented Kelly Shannon, who is producing for us today, and she will gather, she has been gathering, I know, the questions that have been coming through in the chat as we've been going. So we'll start with a couple of the questions from the chat, and then we'll open it up to you. You'll be able to raise your hand. There's a raise hand function in the tool, and if you're not familiar, it's you go to the participants and you click on the participants, and that should open up a place where you can raise your hand. We'll call on you and you'll be able to ask your question to Melanie. So Kelly, do we have any questions from the chat?
We do. I have two easy ones. One, Brenda, first for you is, could you just address the replay?
Oh, sure. The replay period is February 10th. So there's a replay after the series is over. During the series, if you've gotten your email, if you look in the Facebook group, you'll see it all there. You get one masterclass per day. And so it's up for 24 hours. You have 24 hours to watch it as many times as you want. And then the next one opens. And so the replay for this will be part of the replay period starting on February 10th. And it's also going to be in the Facebook group.
Great.
Thank you.
Melanie, I have an easier one for you as well. For the first one is this is from Seva. So Seva, if you want to say anything, just raise your hand. But is the toe test, does it need to be performed sitting, standing? Does it matter?
Yeah, I would say you need to at least be sitting. Like it does not work so well when you're lying down. Like you have your feet against something. Okay. You know, I've played with it both sitting down and standing up. I think it's absolutely easier the more weight bearing you have on yourself, but I think it's good I think you should be able to do it in both positions.
Okay.
It's so cool that you can do the simple little toe test to see kind of how what's going on in your body. If you're not connected, that's a simple test that you can do. So I love it. Great. Thank you. Yes. Next question.
Carolina was asking, if you are panic breathing, is one of the solutions to just go into breathing normally. Like, I think she means like expanding more.
You can, well, I think that if you're panic breathing, I think absolutely changing not going back to normal breathing. I think you have to pick a different pattern. So I would say breathe into the backside of your heart. Like those things that we did, inhaling into the backside of your heart is a really effective way to mitigate panic breathing. Like even the pulling on your ears, I've had people have that be helpful for people, but I think you need a specific pattern. I think because your normal breathing pattern and most people's normal breathing pattern is too much in their upper chest and not enough, like the air does not get down low enough. Like we're over to where we habitually breathe up here, and we're only really supposed to breathe up here in stressful, like legitimate fight or flight situations, but we don't come out of that fight or flight mode so much anymore, or as well as we need to have the breath really go lower. And so breathing into the backside of your heart is really it can be a very effective way to offset the panic breathing.
So along those lines, Melanie, Michelle was asking, what is the benefit of exhaling through your mouth as opposed to the nose in the exercises we were doing?
Well, there are benefits. You could do both. I mean, there's value to only nasal breathing. Like that's just part of a longer discussion. But it really has to do with the partial pressures created in the lungs and the mechanics of it. And so when you and having the really, really long exhale through the mouth, and ideally with when you're blowing like a candle, you're getting a little bit of resistance to the air, ideally. So having that resistance to the air is really helpful in getting the diaphragm repositioned. I will sometimes have people blow up a balloon. I just didn't ask you guys all to show up with balloons. So it's
so that pressure helps readjust the diaphragm into a more dome natural shape.
Into a more domed position. Yeah.
The next one is, where can people find more of your work? So
my free gift for you guys is at expansionpoints.com. Like I talk a lot about compression points. I'm trying to talk about them in the positive in terms of expansion points. That this is where we can expand, on many levels. And I also have my primary website's under my name, melanieweller.com, but it's linked from expansion points.
And that'll be included as well in the details in the recording when we get to the recording phase. When you get the replays, the free gift and all that information will be there as well, along with the links.
One more question in chat is, how often do we need to do the breathing exercise, and how many repetitions of the exercises?
So I would rather have you do it than not do it. So I'm negotiable is the short answer on that. So a lot of times I will tell you, you will get change in 3 to 5 breaths will give you some amount of change. And sometimes that gives you a lot of change. If you have a more acute situation, or you're really going to do this as a deeper practice, I'll have people do 5 sets of 5 breaths. But if it's easier for you, but if people tell me that they are more likely to do 5 breaths 5 times a day, I'm okay with that. And I think that if you can do it, it's just so important to make it fit into your life. And I think if you have something really going on, I think doing it daily, for getting in 5 sets one way or the other daily is really beneficial. If you don't have anything, if you just want to do it a few times a week, or if you do it for every day for a few weeks, and then you can back down. I don't think it's something that you necessarily have to do every single day for the rest of your life, but absolutely do it if you help somebody move furniture and you think, oh, I'm going to pay for that tomorrow. Like my back's going to hurt or something like that, that you're going to, or you worked out really hard to the point, when you get those little warning signals in your body, or even if you're starting to feel anxious, you're starting to feel stressed, something traumatic happens that is confusing and you don't know what to do, you can't access your intuition, your gut, your vagus nerve is your gut brain, it's your heart brain, it's your voice. And so by these exercises will give you greater access to that as well.
We should go back to what Melanie started with, is remember all of the different aspects of your life and your body that the vagus nerve affects. So something as simple as this breathing exercise, how that can start to affect the different aspects of the body. So remember all the things that it affects, right? The voice, the heart, the gut. So it's a really simple thing you can add to your daily practice. 5 breaths for 5. That's pretty easy.
Yeah. Cool. I had somebody message me off my YouTube channel. They did the ear pull technique, and not even at the version I showed you. This is just plain old ear pull technique. And it got rid of her heart palpitations that she had been struggling with. So you never they're ridiculously simple. And I've even gotten rid of people's hallucinations with these exercises. So the application is very broad, and it's, I'm looking for research partners to really, I'm such the artist in all of this. I need a good, somebody who, I need a good research designer to partner with on a lot of this, but it, it blows me away that I can help people in this way. And that, and that there's this, the application is very broad. And I think business has a really unique opportunity to create these cultures of wellness that keep people out of the doctor's office in the first place. If you understand that that being the hero in somebody else's story is a problem that's going to manifest ultimately in the body, you're potentially able to mitigate somebody from, say, needing a neck surgery.
Yes, please.
And so I think we have this really amazing opportunity to, I think business especially can be so on the front end of this.
Shifting us from a sickness model to a wellness model.
Yeah. Most of our definition of wellness overwhelmingly is testing us to see if we're sick.
And then Sylvia would like to come on, if that's okay with you guys,
Yeah.
to ask you a question. So Sylvia, I just sent you to unmute, and I'm just going to ask you to, if you want to start your video, I can add you to the spotlight.
Okay, I'm going to try it there if it works.
There
Oh,
we
I
go.
see you there. Yeah. Here we go. There you
Thank you
guys.
so much, everyone, for all your work anyway. Melanie, I just have a question about, I suppose it's more about pains and aches that travel in the body. And this is my suspicion, that it's probably trauma related, but the pains can be either in the chest, or the next day it can be in the neck. The next day it can be in the leg or the hip. So I'd like to just find out what would be the best thing to approach that, where it's so complex, but is it just breathing, or do we need
Well,
to do...
I think the breathing can take you through a, I will say one, having a, I will go change this right now, and add it. I didn't put it in I don't think the email for the free gift, but on my, I'll double check this. On my YouTube channel, there's an hour-long vagus nerve decompression course that takes you through a more extensive self-assessment. And I do think that, to me, what you're describing is somebody that doesn't have very good shock absorption in their system. And that can be mechanical shock absorption, that could be emotional shock absorption, that can show up in a lot of different ways. And so these vagus nerve exercises are really great at restoring that shock absorption on a bigger scale. The other piece of it is, we all know somebody who walks like an elephant, and you can hear them way down the hall coming towards you. And we know other people that are like ninjas, and suddenly they appear. And if you're somebody that pay attention to the sound of your footsteps. If you're somebody that has very loud footsteps, you need to practice walking softly. You don't need to go slower. You need to go softer. The research that overwhelmingly shows that walking softly reduces in athletes, jumping softly reduces injury risk. Runners that hit the ground with more than 6.5 times their body weight are more likely to have orthopedic pain. And I don't think the research is quite caught up with walking in that way, or not that I'm aware of, but you can't tell me that the 60-year-old that's been walking at a high volume is going to have fewer problems than the one that's been walking at a low volume. And so the biggest gift you can give yourself for your longevity is to walk softly. Walking is basically a controlled fall from one foot to the other. And when we get trauma and stress and injury, we stop controlling the fall, and it becomes a crash from one foot to the other. But that shock absorption comes back much more naturally when you have those horizontal structures in your body open, because you've got you have vertical flow happening in your body. And so then you can load it better. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. Thank you
when you're
so much.
walking. So I think that I would start with that. I actually just had just the other week had a 16-year-old with a girl with a very similar description of her symptoms. And we did a lot of playing with with her walking pattern. And I'll tell, if we have time, I'll tell the longer story around it, but she was really able to, we had to kind of unwire her brain, get her out of that familiar walking pattern to give her a new one. So we are all incredible. We are all masters of compensation. We can really, we will all take the path of least resistance with movement. and you will walk in the way that's familiar to you because you're well practiced at it. But walking softly is a huge gift. Oh, I'm sorry. Definitely.
I said I definitely am a heavy walker.
Yeah, I would start there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Brings a
Thank you.
whole new meaning to tread lightly.
Yeah.
Another question that came in is around fertility. So does this work with the vagus nerve and the work you're talking about, Melanie, help somebody with fertility issues?
I haven't had, I actually just finished a series of sessions with somebody around that. So I don't have I haven't had a large test group around that is the short answer. I've had more in terms of helping people with pelvic pain and incontinence and that realm of things. But I think that it is absolutely, it definitely, I think that I think you can make the scientific rationale as to how that would help, just in terms of reducing stress. I know so many people that adopted a child and then got pregnant right afterwards because the stress, was basically taken off. So I would suspect that that it is. And the population I really want to get into with this is with doulas and labor and delivery nurses, because your vagus nerve innervates the cervix. So I think in slow labors, it could really help that. I had 2 30-hour labors. Like I would have really liked, to have maybe had some more techniques at that time of my life. And and vagus nerve is involved also with lactation and breastfeed, to have it be part of breastfeeding support for people that might not be producing enough milk. And those are they are definitely stress related, just, issues. And so I think that, so I'll let you know. I know my person that I worked with for her fertility was in a dramatically better place as we wrapped this week. So that was exciting. So I think she's, and we talked about revisiting, doing a little recap in a few months just to see where she is, because I'm excited to see how it all works out for her.
The last question then that I have is, besides the free gift that you're giving, which I'll put a link to in the chat, is there any other resources you would recommend for people that want to know more, can explore?
I think from as far as information you can really use, Dawson Church is an author that has some really great books. His most recent one is called Bliss Brain. And he doesn't cover vagus nerve in tons of detail, but he covers things that he does talk about it, but it gives you really, really practical information. Around the vagus nerve, Stephen Porges is a PhD who his work he calls it polyvagal theory, and there's a lot about that, but most of that is very clinical. So if you're not clinical, you probably aren't going to have it be as interesting to you. And honestly, I don't know anybody else that's talking about it like a pinched nerve. Okay. Especially not on a big scale. So, but if you Google vagus nerve and health, Elemental, which is a section of Medium, has done some really great articles on it over the course of the last year or so.
And in your free gift, we're including the course on YouTube. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes. Well, the course, I have 2 of them. So okay. It takes you to a landing page that has a different course.
Perfect.
I believe I'm going to go double check this right after this, that it sends you an email that has a link to the YouTube.
Great.
So that you'll get both of them. Yeah.
Great. So yeah, if you go ahead and share just a little bit more on the free gift, and then we'll move on to, I think that was our final question. You'll have one more opportunity for one more question, and then we'll go.
Yeah. So the free gift is my updated vagus nerve course, which is really a much more, I just streamlined it because like in the first one, I go through evaluating each of the 6 major compression points and do a different exercise for each one. But really, at the end of the day, I spend most of my time giving people these 3 exercises that really that you get that gave you the biggest bang for your buck once, and it's pretty much what I took you through today. And there's also an infographic for the underpinnings of each of the 6 compression points. So your heroics and your desires, your emotions and your adaptability. So you can go through that and reflect upon how that's showing up in your life. And if you, my social media for Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook is all Embody Your Star is my handle. And please, I'm easy to find. My contact information is all over, but the free gift is at Expansion Points, and email me, ask@melanieweller.com. I love to hear from you guys. So
yeah, she doesn't go away and we're going to be in our Facebook group. So there's lots of goodies and discussion to have there and to share. I'll be so curious. Share what was your biggest aha, and if you still have more questions, let's continue the discussion, certainly in our Facebook group. And Melanie, thank you so much for taking the time today to share your experience and these incredible tools and all that it can do to support people having not only more flow in their life and in their relationships and their business, but also just a greater level of wellness. Ooh, yeah. And helping us shift our paradigm a little bit. You have such a great paradigm shifting perspective. So thank you for the time. Thank you for walking us through the exercise, because I love doing it, because I often will end our sessions like, what's the one thing you're going to do? And for those of you that were able to join us live, we did it, right? We did some of those breathing exercises. We tested our toes. So start to put it into practice. Can you do it every day? And then how many times a day?
Brenda, before we started, you told me you were going to ask me one thing at the end, like a take home or what?
Yes, I am. And please,
okay. I just wanted to make sure, because I had that right.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I was going to ask you, what's your parting thought? What would you like? What's the last piece you'd like to share with us?
Okay. So this is all relative to that vagus nerve compression at the level of your heart. And in, Egyptian mythology, their cardinal directions, what I believe are their cardinal directions, are knowledge, wisdom, magic, and truth. So we bring knowledge into wisdom, and we bring magic from behind us to show up as truth in front of us. And there's an Andean proverb that says, your future is behind you, propelling you forward, and your past is in front of you, waiting for you to make peace with it and clear your way. Your future has your back. The universe has your back. And really breathe into that and feel supported by that. And that's like, if you can do that, life will flow for you in many, many magical ways.
That's such a beautiful thing for us to end on. Oh my goodness. Can you do the directions and say that for us one more time?
So knowledge, we bring knowledge into wisdom. Knowledge from above into wisdom below, and we bring magic from behind us to show up as truth in front of us. And our futures are that magic. That futures are behind us, propelling us forward. And our pasts are in front of us, waiting for us to make peace with them, make peace with it, and clear our way.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's so resonated, right? That our future has our back, and that if we can courageously, bravely step into the pieces of our past that still are inviting us to reconcile, that are inviting us to deeper levels of awareness, deeper levels of peace, right? We've got to go through that into that brighter future. And so when we're dealing with the challenges and the setbacks, right? What piece of that is there a piece that still we need to make peace with, that will allow us to propel forward into that, taking that magic into truth? I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was so much fun for me too. And I love this and I love taking, and that's a little bit of the art of what I do in terms of getting people unlocked from their limbic systems in terms with story that you can really, when you put that emotional piece with it, with the physical piece, you get a much bigger result.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So Melanie, so much gratitude for your gifts, for the generosity of the gifts that you're also sharing for people to dive more into this, to get more education around their vagus nerve and what's possible as we start to do some new exercises and tools. And for all of you that have joined us, if you joined us live here, and if you're joining us on the recording, thank you so much for taking the time and for investing in yourself and in your future and into the next level of thriving. And may that fuel your dreams. So until next time, thrive on and thrive through.